Welcome to the Highland Park Update. My name is Matthew Hirsch. I chair the Borough's Public Information Committee. Thank you to Gary Leslie, chair of the Highland Park Cable TV Committee, for facilitating this program. And we're very honored to have Dr. Scott Taylor, the superintendent of Highland Park Public Schools as of October 1st, 2015. So Dr. Taylor, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
But what I wanted to do first is just talk a little bit about your background, because you are what makes you special about in this capacity is that you're actually a resident of Highland Park.
Well, so I've been a resident for 21 years, and my wife and I were very purposeful in coming to Highland Park. We were married, I think now 20 years, and back then we were scouting out the area and figuring out where we wanted to make roots. We knew we wanted to have a family. So we chose Highland Park because we wanted our kids to grow up in the real world, a diverse world that is a mix of all kinds of people who think different ways. And so that's why we decided to make roots here, because the community meets our values. It's us. And 21 years later, it's our decision has been validated. So now that we've been here 21 years, and our kids are in the middle and high school, boy, I thought I knew about my community, but it's in the last 5 or 6 weeks that I've actually learned more about Highland Park than I have known in 21 years. Probably because this position has given me the opportunity to meet everyone of all walks of life, who have different interests, different needs, different ideas. I almost wish everyone who lives in town could stand in my shoes for just a couple of days to get that same experience, because you really get to better understand the community when you're compelled to work with all of these people. So here we are. My 5 weeks have been thrilling. They really have. Some people thought I was taking a big risk being a resident in this community as well as the chief school leader. But to be frank with you, it's been absolutely wonderful, and it's a risk well taken. I think the work that I have done has been enabled by my knowledge of the community. I really not only know people who I run into at Stop and Shop or Rite Aid or Dish Cafe, but I know what they want on a very intrinsic level. So even though I'm learning more I've learned a lot in the last 5 weeks. When I meet people and they talk about what their concerns are, I feel like on an internal level I know what those concerns are, because I've lived with these folks for so many years. So that's been an advantage of mine. I'm a sociable individual as well, so running into people in town has been a great way for me also to make connections and build relationships.
Well, yeah, and you've said that this is your dream job, basically. And you came from a nearby district in Kenilworth. You were superintendent there, just over the county border. I guess how did that position kind of prepare you for Highland Park and the challenges thereof, and maybe talk a little bit about what you have what you hope to do in the next 5 weeks, or
Sure.
how you're going to get better acclimated.
So Kenilworth was a great way for me to really understand what it takes to be an educational leader at this level. I took that community that was in need of somebody to set high standards and serve as a learning role model to, I think, a much better place. So that set me up to come to another community that already has set high standards for most of its kids, but not necessarily all of its kids. So being that Highland Park is a much more diverse community than any district in which I've worked, and this is the 5th school district in which I've worked in my 22-plus year career, I now know what it's going to take to get all of our kids of different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different identities, to get to the same place at which their peers are being expected to get. So I think that while Kenilworth has set me up to hit this ground running, and frankly, this district has all the raw materials it takes to be world class, and have everybody be on that world class level. It did, I believe, need somebody who has some experience to bring all those pieces together. And the experiences I've had not only in Kenilworth, prior to that, when I was a principal, I was a director of curriculum, an assistant principal, and of course a teacher. All of those experiences have allowed me to just jump right in and run without too many hiccups. Now, one of the reasons, I just have to speak to this, one of the reasons why this has been my dream job is because of really my background. I was raised by a musician. My mother's a retired art teacher. My sister was an actress for a little while. So I was really born onto the arts and in a very creative environment. So for me now to work in a very creative environment that happens to be very art-centric. I mean, we place a wonderful emphasis on the arts, visual, music, performing. It's been a real treat for me. It's one of the reasons why this has been my dream job. I'm living in this community for 21 years for a reason. It's the same reason why I want to work in this community.
One of your priorities coming into the district was improving communications and transparency, and that's been a goal advanced by the Board of Ed too. Tell me a little bit about how you hope to achieve those goals.
Sure. So I told the board through the superintendent selection process that I would be spending my first 30, 60, 90 days developing an entry plan, taking what Mr. Soto started in terms of building trust and relationships with the community to the next level. And so I have been working to do that by leveraging social media. I encourage our community to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We use social media to help our community who doesn't have an opportunity to walk the halls and visit classrooms to actually see what's going on a daily basis. So every day or so, we'll post 2 or 3 pictures of the kids in action, the teachers in action. It's really a great way to really conceptualize what we're doing. And I'm using the Honeywell Instant Alert System, which is our reverse 911 calling system, every couple of weeks to provide really important information to the community, such as I did last night when I talked about a group I'd like to develop, a cabinet of members of the community called the Superintendent's Community Advisory Committee. This group would meet with me 2-3 times a year to provide me input on how I'm doing, how our district's doing, immediate short-term concerns that we should be addressing. And then the group and I will develop action plans that will define how we're going to fix some of these problems. I'll work with my leadership team, my faculty, along with the community advisory group to implement the action plan. Building on all of that is the need for me to be out in the field and make sure that as a representative of the school district, people feel that they can come to me if they have concerns and they don't want to share them in an organized or open forum like a committee. So I've been meeting with local advocacy groups, individuals who are important in our community, civic leaders. Just last night I met with the Highland Park parents of students of color who expressed some of their concerns, and I plan to meet with them on a regular basis. I had a chance to meet with Pastor Seth Capradell. I'll be meeting with Rabbi Daniel Lowe, local yeshiva president, and many others, so that they know if they need a go-to person, I'm that individual who can take their concerns and then bring them back to the school district.
What are some of the, and I've obviously, not to get into specifics, or you can if you'd like, but generally speaking, what are some of the concerns or just thoughts that you're hearing from these various groups?
That's a great question. So there are a lot of people in this community who have a lot to share. My doors are open. I've already been meeting with parents and all kinds of folks in this office. So what I'll say is that I'm working hard to find a trend. So one of the things that has already come to my plate, it's a trend of concerns I'm hearing and seeing, is the need for us to bridge the achievement gap. And that sounds cliche, so let me be specific about what I mean by that. We have in this district a core group of students, or high achievers, you can call them, who perform very well. And there's a good chance that they'd perform just as well in another school district. We also have a group of students who have challenges that they face that those other group of students don't face, who need a little help. They need a leg up. They need support. They need to be enfranchised. Mm-hmm. And those kids who don't perform as well by certain measures, it appears haven't had those opportunities to shine. It speaks to what I said earlier when I shared my vision for this district. It can be world class for all kids, not just the core group of high achievers or high performers who we get, every year. That's one major concern that is a trend I hear among those folks with whom I speak. Others are safety and security. How far do we go in keeping our schools safe and secure, or how far do we still need to go? So I'm going to be tackling those concerns in the short term, but more importantly in the long term. And that takes me to something that I want the community to be very well aware of. Come likely around March, after the new board and I have gotten a chance to work with each other for a couple of months, I'm going to be leading the board and the community through the strategic planning process. It's a process that I'm sure many residents have experienced in their business life, whether in the private sector or in the public sector. What we're going to do, though, that sets us apart is bring not just people inside the school district together to plan strategically 3, 4, 5 years out, but civic leaders, lay people, owners of small businesses, residents who don't send their kids to our schools, together. And we could be talking about up to 100 people, if not more, together over the course of a couple of days in a conference-style setting to first reflect on where our district has been over the last couple of decades, how we've succeeded, how we've failed. Then we'll talk about what our aspirations are, our goals, our dreams, the things we want to see our district become 5 years out at the most. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to get down to the hard work, and that is identifying 2, 3, maybe 4 goals that frame those aspirations, taking into account the history that we talked about earlier, and then we'll develop action plans to get us to those goals. Now, those action plans and those goals will have to be very concrete, very specific. They'll have to be measurable and outcome-based, because if they're not, they're just going to be things that we did for the sake of doing them. Mm-hmm. I do not want the strategic planning process to be simply something that we're just going through the motions and doing. I want it to be authentic. I also wanted to do the job of guiding everything in this district: budget planning, professional development planning, superintendent goal planning, Board of Education goal planning. These goals should be goals that encompass everything that goes on in this school district.
In the past, the district has tried to undertake strategic planning processes before, most recently 2 years ago. That process faltered for a number of reasons. Tell us a little bit about what will be different this time and how you plan to work with the Board of Ed on acting on these.
So being a resident, of course, I was in the thick of things a few years ago. When I took this role, this position, I knew what had to be done, which is why my entry plan was so committed to promoting transparency, building relationships, and doing a better job communicating. I think I have started to do that, and people are realizing that we, as a district, are already in a better place than we may have been. Come the time that we begin the strategic planning process, we'll have a new Board of Education who I know is committed to the strategic planning process, doing it the right way, the authentic way. I don't plan on stopping the stuff that I'm doing right now. I'll be meeting with people from now through the remainder of my tenure as a superintendent at Highland Park. So this building of relationships is going to continue and only improve, only expand, to the point at which when we get to March and we start strategic planning, I do believe people will have an even more trustworthy relationship with the school district than they may have had for years, let alone 2 years ago. So I do anticipate that we're going to be starting this process almost with a clean slate, a clean relationship slate.
We've talked a lot about building relationships within the community. A lot of external relationship building, which a lot of people feel is very important, including myself. Tell me a little bit about these first 5 weeks. Getting to know and building relationships with teachers, faculty, staff, building administrators.
So, one of the real tricks to building these relationships is being visible. I'm in the halls and the classrooms almost 2 hours every day. I try to get to every school every day, at the very least, every school every other day. And I've been making a concerted effort when I walk through the halls to ask teachers questions. I walked into a classroom last week, and I walked the walls. I looked very closely at the walls, and I noticed there were some directions about how kids should get into their literacy groups. So I started to probe the teacher about how many years she's been engaging these kids in these groups over time, and if it's being done in the grade prior, the grade above, and of course she responds. And so by doing that, by probing the teachers about the things that I'm seeing and I'm hearing, I'm learning more about the culture of the school district. And by the way, I'm also getting to know the teachers on a personal level through these efforts. And it's what's also very nice, and this is really the selfish piece of me in doing this, is I'm getting to know the kids. There's nothing more wonderful than walking through the hall and having a little third grader say, "Hi, Dr. Taylor," or just today when I walk out of Dish Cafe and see one of our high school football players put out his hand and give me a handshake and a little pat on the back. I mean, that tells me that the kids trust me. I then hope that'll feed up to the teachers and then beyond to the parents. And it also tells me that they see authority figures like me in a more trusting light. So that's how I've been doing it. That's why I've been building the relationships with the staff. And that's what I've been getting out of these relationships as I've been doing it.
It's an interesting position that you're in. And we had talked about, prior to the start of this interview, the role that principals have as well, where you are almost at service to the community in a very public capacity. That's something that you're not unfamiliar with, obviously. Certainly in Highland Park, you're close. You are at home in that role, but it seems like a role that you're ready to embrace.
Yeah, it is. I remember getting up in front of the staff on September 1st, and I said, "So, folks, I know about 1/3 of you think I'm crazy for taking this job on, because I live 4 blocks from my office, and it's such a high-profile role. But there are crazy people like me out there who fit nicely into these roles. There are a bunch of me out there. There are superintendents who have done what I've done. They've committed to living in their community. There's nothing more special than spending all the time I do. My wife and kids will tell you, I just spend a lot of time on my work, and having it all come right back to your community. You serve the community. You know what that feels like. Well, now I have an opportunity to do that too."
That's great. That's great. Are there any other priorities or that you have for the district that you'd like to discuss tonight?
I do. I do expect. I have expectations. I do expect that our community will step up to the challenge of being decision makers. When I put that call out for the strategic plan process to begin, I want 100 folks out. And if I don't get them, I'm going to be calling them and reaching out to them and say, "Hey, I need you to be a part of this." I expect that our community will give the district a chance. I know it's been a rough road the last few years, but we're in a much better place already. And unless they're a part of the process of helping us make decisions, then we are not going to become world class. I tell you, one of the things that has been beautiful about my role is I've learned how many resources we have. I've had so many Rutgers professors and consultants and folks just dropping into my office asking how they could help. I have a nanotechnologist who wants to run a whole science program this year. We have a local resident who runs a English immersion program in the summer. I have a physicist who wants to work with my high school physics teachers. If I don't have all of those people who haven't come out of the woodworks yet come out for something like the strategic plan process, well, we haven't tapped into our resources then.
Well, thank you, Dr. Taylor. This is great. Welcome to the
pleasure.
district. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to speaking to you the next time. You heard it here, Highland Park. In order for Highland Park to be great, Highland Park needs you. Tune in next time for the Highland Park Update, where we'll be interviewing Councilman Josh Fine. Thank you to Gary Leslie of Highland Park Television, and we'll see you next time.